Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my firm assists physicians with employment contract issues. One topic that I thought I would hit today is what are the most common types of physician compensation models? Spoiler alert, there is no common model. There's, I'd say from contract to contract, the way that people are compensated varies the most. It's kind of the most variable part of any kind of physician contract across contracts. I review hundreds of physician contracts a year, and it just blows my mind how many different ways that different organizations compensate physicians. But there are probably three main types, and I'll go through those right now. So the easiest and simplest way of compensating a physician is just a straight base salary. There's no productivity attached to it, no volume expectations. It's just you do the work, you get paid a base salary, and that's it. People who are just coming out of training, it's not uncommon for them to receive a guaranteed base with no productivity for the first year or two. And there are many jobs where they just pay the base and that's it. However, there are also different ways to compensate physicians that kind of introduce some kind of productivity. And so I'd say the first one is RVUs. So when someone enters an organization, as I just said, no matter if they've been out for a long time or just coming out of training, if you're entering an organization, and this goes mostly for hospitals and big healthcare networks, it's pretty rare to have a physician-owned practice use RVUs. So they'll have an income guarantee, usually for a year or two, and then their compensation many times will then switch completely to RVU production. So meaning how much they make each year is entirely dependent on how many RVUs they generate. I'm not going to get into what an RVU is or how it's calculated. I do have a couple videos. If you're interested, you can take a look at, I go through kind of what an RVU is and how a physician is compensated for it. But on the basic level, they just multiply the number of RVUs you generate times some kind of compensation factor, like a monetary amount that kind of varies by specialty. Usually it's somewhere between $40 to $80. And then they just multiply that times your RVUs, and that's how much you make for the year. Now, obviously there has to be some details that go into that. So usually there'll be some kind of base draw. So the physician will continue to get like a normal salary each month, but then it's reconciled quarterly. So for instance, let's just say their base is, they're taking home $20,000 a month. So at the end of the quarter, they've been given $60,000 from the employer, and then they'll do a look back on how many RVUs they generated times the compensation factor. If there is a surplus, so meaning they generated more via RVUs than they made, then usually they're then given a bonus. Most employers in that scenario will not give a full percentage of with a base draw. So let's just say in the previous year, someone just via RVUs generated like $240,000, right? So it's $20,000 a month. The employer's not going to just give them a base of $20,000 a month because there's going to be variables involved. If someone takes a 2-week vacation, but they keep getting paid $20,000 per month, well, then there's going to be a deficit that either they're going to have to pay back or carry forward. So most employers will give maybe around 80% of what they made in the previous year as their base draw. And then that way there aren't a lot of negative balances carried forward. No, most physicians do not like that at all. So that's one way of doing it. It's just after the income guarantee, straight RVU compensation. There are others that will do a hybrid of a guaranteed base in addition to RVUs. So they'll like give some kind of target, monthly, quarterly, yearly target of RVUs. And then once the physician hits that amount, then they can then receive a production bonus. And as I said before, it would be just the RVUs generated above a certain amount times the compensation factor. So that's primarily used in hospital and healthcare organizations. A different model is net collections based, and that's used, I would say, primarily from physician-owned groups, some smaller practices. And so how that would work is the amount collected by the practice that is a direct result of the physician's services would be calculated, and then the physician would get a certain percentage of that. So usually the percentage would be between 30 to 40%, somewhere in there. Now, if you're a physician, you think, well, that's completely unfair. I only get 30 to 40%. But when you take into account overhead, staffing, supplies, payroll taxes, all that kind of stuff, it does work out mathematically to being equitable for both parties around that amount. You are not going to get net collections-based compensation, it's like 50% or anything. It's just not going to happen. So in a net collections-based compensation model, it's similar to kind of an RVU-based model in the fact that there'll usually be some kind of reconciliation on a monthly basis. And then, so if you were to, generate whatever, $100,000 in a month, then they would just do the calculation. If you're on 40%, then you'd get $40,000, usually paid within 15 to 30 days of the end of the month. And that's what you make. There are some more variables that go into, and this is the tricky part, is if you just go into a job and it's just pure collections from the very beginning, you obviously aren't going to make a lot in the first couple of months, because the average accounts receivable cycle from when you do a service to when you get paid through the insurance companies can be anywhere from 30 to 90 days. So you could work for the first month or two and make a tiny amount of money, and then it grows over time. So usually in those scenarios, we try to bake in some kind of draw so that the physician isn't just making a tiny amount in the first few months. What's my opinion on what's fair and what's not? It really just depends upon the job and the specialty of the physician. I think all of the different compensation models are fair if the compensation is right. I think on a kind of like a motivational level, it makes sense to incorporate some kind of production into the contract. Someone who just has a base salary and there's just absolutely no bonus or upside in producing more or working more, it's just human nature that they're just I don't know if being stagnant is the right word, but people are motivated by money. That's just a reality. And if an employer can incorporate some way of compensating a physician who's ultra productive, there's no downside to that. It's just, I guess, probably a matter of whether the employer is creative or not. But there's a million ways of doing compensation. So those are the three most common models: straight base salary, RVU based production, and net collections. And then there's like so many permutations that would then kind of be a hybrid of all three of those. If you have any questions, you can always contact my firm at the phone number listed below in the description, or you can reach us through our website, ChelleLaw.com. That's CHELLE law.com. And hopefully that was some informative about the different compensation models, and I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks.